Jackrabbits from 2 different countries who continue to follow running in the upper Midwest.
And we want to discuss important topics, inspiring stories, and extraordinary performances in running. Welcome back to the Pivotal Running Podcast. Today we have the honor and privilege to talk to Nick Burrow, an Auckland native from New Zealand. Nick received both his undergrad and graduate degrees at South Dakota State University. Running for the Jackrabbits, he earned an NCAA team cross-country national title his freshman year of 1996, and additionally 6 All-American honors in both indoor and outdoor track and field. Nick also was the 1999 NCAA Division II Indoor Mile National Champion, where he set the Division II indoor collegiate record of 4:03 at the RCA Dome in Indianapolis, Indiana. Currently, Nick resides in Christchurch, New Zealand, where he continues to develop leaders of character at the New Zealand Institute of Sport. Thanks for joining us today on the podcast, Nick. How's everything going on the South Island?
Thanks, Marty. It's good to see you, mate. We've had a bit of a catch up before this connection, but hey, look, it's so good to see a familiar face from so long ago. It's probably, I don't know, when was it? Probably close to 15, 20 years since I've seen you last in the flesh. So you start to miss the old days of college as time sort of flies on so quickly. Thanks for inviting me along to have a bit of a chat. Look forward to a bit of powwow.
Yeah, Nick, thanks so much, man. You really started this journey for me in running. Certainly at our time together at South Dakota State University, you really were a great encourager for me. And I've used that as a great model the rest of my time in the Army. Really, you pulled up alongside of me early in my days at South Dakota State, and you believed in me. So, man, I got to hand it to you for being just a great example for me to go ahead and take that as a model over the last 20 years in the Army. I've been using that same model, man. So thank you so much for the leadership that you had given me back 20 years ago, man. I appreciate it.
Don't remind me.
No, so how did your running journey start, man? How did this whole thing for you get started in New Zealand?
Oh, look, it's probably like most athletes that come through, Marty. Look, you try a few sports, don't you? And then you tend to migrate towards the one that you get some results in, or somebody shows you a bit of passion, or gives you a bit of faith that, hey, you're quite good at this, and then fosters your development a little bit. So, I think back to my first day, I was always quite good at athletics, track and field. As a kid, I used to win most, 100, 200, 400, all those types of races, and I felt pretty good on that. I actually represented New Zealand for the first time when I was 11 years old. We have something called the Trans-Tasman competition here, which is Australia versus New Zealand meet for young up and coming kids, essentially. So that was sort of my first foray into sort of, I suppose you could say, hyper competitive athletics at that age. And that sort of really sort of made me think, is this something that I want to do, and how can I develop myself, and do I enjoy this? And the whole process of having to compete and then being selected after the competition, and then racing against the best Australians. And I'll be honest, especially at that point, the Australians were a lot better than New Zealand. They really just had some talent that came through from those young ages. So it was a really good opportunity to get out there and sort of race the best, I suppose you could say, from another part of the world, although it's close. So that kind of was the start for me. I competed in the 400 at that youth event, and but after that, I kind of fell out of the sport for a little bit. My parents were people that didn't push me at all in terms of having to play a sport or do something like that. So I was quite free to make my own decisions at those young ages. So I did drift out of the sport. I got into skateboarding in quite a serious way.
That's awesome.
For years. was quite good on the half pipe and the quarter pipe, and doing all the tricks and all that sort of stuff at that stage. But then I got to my first year in high school, and it was actually, like I was saying before, I actually had a teacher in my first year in high school that sort of said, "Hey, Nick, you've got a bit of a talent in this area. I'd like to try and develop you a little bit. Come join the club that I run for." And so I did. And then during that year, he took me to the New Zealand secondary schools cross-country champs to compete against the best high school kids in New Zealand at that age. And I was probably 13 or something at that point. Got my ass kicked. I remember, I think I got 150th or something like that in that meet. So look, it wasn't a particularly successful foray that first time around. And then I sort of dropped out of the sport a little bit again for probably another 2 years during high school. And it was only my junior and senior year of high school that I sort of got back into it again. I got hooked up with a coach. Actually the same coach that Greg had when he was coming up through the age groups. And it was that coach that really started to put some structured training into me and what I was doing. He was an old Lydiard Stowell, so sort of followed some of the Lydiard training principles, which, I think have been proven to be pretty successful at this time. And so I sort of developed from there under him in those last 2 years of high school. And I suppose what really sort of caked it for me at that point was in my junior year, I won the New Zealand secondary schools championships in the 800 metre event there, and that's quite a big competition. I bet Nick Willis's brother in that title. And then my coach sort of said, "What are we going to do next?" And we're thinking about the next year, my senior year. And that was, let's go for the double. So in that senior year, we went for the 800, 1500, the old Peter Snell double, and gave that a crack in my senior year and won both of those events in my last year of high school. So that actually started to give me a bit of profile and a real feeling of success and how winning feels good. And sort of carried that on, and then we sort of set our eyes for what's next. And so what next was, aiming for the World Junior Championships at that time, which are going to be held in, put in my age here, but they were going to be held in 1994 in Lisbon, Portugal. So we aimed to qualify for the World Junior Championships at that point, and I was successful and did. Ran about 149, I think, for a 17-year-old in the 800 to qualify for the World Juniors. And the following year went off and ran at that competition, which again was the international level, the best athletes in the world. We had Daniel Coman, who I saw there, who won the 5K and the 10K double that year, and Andre Butka won the 1500 that year. A top Australian that I trained and raced with as a youth won the 800 metre. So really saw some real talent there. And so that kind of got me to that point. And those are my junior years encapsulated in a few sentences. But that's probably what brought me up, Marty. It was just just getting into it. I dropped out of the sport a few times, got brought back into it by people that were passionate and saw some talent in me, and then I just sort of went from there.
It's pretty amazing to hear kind of that you actually fell out of the sport, but then for those junior years, the junior senior year, and then all of a sudden you're at the World Junior Championships, and like you're seeing guys who are just running at phenomenal speeds, and then you yourself are breaking 150 in just height as a 17-year-old. I mean, that's pretty remarkable to hear. So let's talk about your recruitment process. I mean, if you go to World Junior Championships, there's gonna be a lot of probably interest, I especially probably from America, and then to maybe lure you into coming over and studying at the university. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So once I finished high school, I went to university in New Zealand and in Auckland. So I got into a good academic program there. And, there were a few options. At that point, New Zealand was starting to put a little bit of development back into young athletes. And so Peter Snell actually at that time started up a Peter Snell Institute. And that was a way of trying to invest in young people coming through and give them some funding and give them some coaching support and some of those things that go around, any successful athlete. And so that kind of kept me in New Zealand at that point. I did, when I went away to World Juniors, I did get some offers from universities when I came back. But at that point, it seems funny now, but I actually knew nothing about American universities at that point. I mean, I knew nothing about the American system, NCAA. It was totally foreign to me. So I didn't really know anything about it. So didn't really seriously consider those offers originally. And a lot of them were to Division I colleges and things like that. But chose not to take them and stayed in New Zealand for 2 years. At that point, but my running kind of really started sort of going backwards a little bit in, post 1994 World Juniors, first year university. From that point on, I actually really started losing my way a little bit with running and started running not particularly well. I started to lose a bit of passion for the sport, wasn't training probably as hard as I needed to go to the next level. And I actually think if I didn't get the offer in 1996 from Scott Underwood to come to South Dakota State, I probably would have fallen out of the sport quite possibly at that point. So although I hadn't considered the American system at all up to that point, because I was getting into the stage where, hey, I'm not really enjoying my running here, I'm not really going anywhere at this point. Hey, this opportunity that I got offered through Coach Underwood, really made me sort of think, okay, maybe it is time to take a bit of a risk, go overseas, see what the American system's about. We were starting to have a few more New Zealand athletes. We're starting to go over to the States at that point as well. So I was starting to hear about athletes competing over there. But as you can imagine, again, in 1996, there was no internet. There's no real way to research any of these universities. If I wanted to know something, you picked up your encyclopedia book and opened it up, and that's what you knew about something. So it was very hard to research universities and find out anything about them all the way in New Zealand. So I didn't really know what I was getting into. I really didn't know what South Dakota was like. I didn't know anything about the university. I didn't know anything about their history. I really just did it on a whim because I was sort of thinking, I need to change. I need to try something different. And that was the offer that was on the table at that point. So essentially that was the recruitment process. Once the offers came through, it's the same as any US-based kid that's going to university. I had to go to a school here in Auckland and sit the SAT exam to get that side of things done. Got sent my letter of intent, which I signed and sent off. And then I really just had some really good comms with Scott Underwood at that point, who called me up on a regular basis and asked how I was doing, asked how he could help. Was really helpful. So everything I needed, he was really there working one-on-one with me to try and get everything solved that I needed to get solved. And so, I really sort of thought this is a really good coach. This is a guy who cares about his athletes, has a lot of knowledge. And at that point, I think he was really trying to develop that team for the 1996 NCAA cross-country champs. At that point, and was looking for some athletes to maybe bring on board to help us with that sort of task that we had at the end of that year. So that excited me too. The prospect of going over there, being part of a team, because in New Zealand, running is certainly never a team aspect generally. There are some road relays and things like that where you can run as a bit of a team, but generally you're an individual and you go out there and you do your thing. So the thought of being part of a university team and going off and competing at these meets and you know, with an eye towards potentially winning a national championship, you know, that was really exciting for me, and you know, made my decision at that point relatively easy along the way. And as you know, at that point too, you know, this offer didn't just come out of the blue to go to South Dakota State. I mean, we had Mark McEwen, another New Zealand athlete who was already at state, and it was Mark that gave Coach Underwood my details and said, give this guy a call. He could be potentially keen to come over. I was actually only the second choice, essentially, to come in. I know Mark had given the name of a guy called Paul Amy, who was actually a very good triathlete, and so was a very strong runner in triathlon. And I think he was originally planning on coming over, but then due to triathlon and all the stuff that was going on in that sport at the time, decided that no, he was going to stay put in New Zealand. So then the offer sort of came my way, and so I took that on. And you know, Mark was a great runner as well at that point. You know, sometimes you know, I'm sure you'll interview him at some point, but Mark had run 14 minutes flat as an 18-year-old in the 5K, and he got 24th at the World Cross Country Championships. You know, just 10 seconds behind El Barouge that year. And so, you know, he had a good reputation as well, and I'd known him well from our time in New Zealand. And so I was pretty excited to go over there and have another Kiwi there, and let's get this job done.
It's really insightful how you tell, you know, the recruitment process and the fact that you were, you know, getting phone calls from Scott Underwood and really kind of, you know, building this sort of talent-based pool of athletes to set forth and try to win a national title. You know, it's one thing to go and have all this talent, but actually to making it happen is a completely another story. So can you talk about some of that, you know, that went on in the fall of '96, man? You hit the ground running, literally, and started on this process or pursuit of trying to win a national title.
Yeah, so it sort of all started when I showed up for the first time in Sioux Falls, South Dakota Airport, and I was waiting to get picked up. You know, Scott said that he'd be at the airport to pick me up, and I get there, and I'm in the terminal, and there's no Scott Underwood, but there is a Tom Henderson, and so Coach Henderson at that point comes up to me and introduces himself and says, "Hey, are you and Nick from New Zealand?" And, "Hey, I'm the new coach at South Dakota State." And I was sort of, Coach Underwood had mentioned nothing of this, and I think he'd done that very strategically. So I didn't sort of change my mind last minute and decide not to come. But yeah, so Tom Henderson's there to pick me up, and he had his assistant. So he had a pole vault coach, was his assistant, Jill Nutbrock. And so they both picked me up and drove me back to Brookings. And, you know, then it was really just, you know, meeting the team. Now I showed up at, I think, August of 1996, and that was right when the Atlanta Olympics had just started. So I was lucky enough that Jason Massman, one of our teammates on that 1996 team, had offered me his apartment because he was still out of state at that time on holiday. And so I took over his apartment until all the dorms and stuff are open, and I could move into those. So I just remember just sitting hours on end in his apartment, watching the '96 Olympics, cranking away, and Michael Johnson winning his medals and all that type of stuff that was going on at that time, and thinking this is all pretty great, and getting used to the running. So I think, as you can imagine, the environment is probably very different in Brookings, South Dakota, as opposed to Auckland, New Zealand. So there was definitely a little bit of a period of time to readjust to the environment. What I mean by that is it was a lot hotter than what I was used to. The humidity was way higher than what I was used to. So that was a bit of a struggle getting used to that as a distance runner. So I had to sort of accommodate to that. There was no one else around. So for those first probably first 3 weeks, I was pretty much on my own. Mark was there as well, but Mark was working at Perkins, doing his waiter work at that point. So I didn't see much of him during the day. But really, it was an opportunity for me to familiarise myself with the university, go into the athletic department and meet some of the people in there. Find my way around the university, talk to the international student advisory team members, find out where the track was, the indoor track, all that sort of stuff that was going on there. So just familiarise myself with what was going on, choose my major, all those types of things that all students have to do. And then it was really getting out and just exploring some of the trails and some of the running loops. We've all heard of the Undy 8 and all these types of courses that were plotted around the area. So I sort of started to learn my way around and just get started with training a little bit. I don't think I really came over probably in particularly good shape. I had a few sort of injuries prior to coming over. So I had a little bit of a rebuild that I needed to try and do to get, try and get fit again at that point. But then slowly all the rest of the team started to come back into Brookings, and we sort of school started, and then we had the opportunity to get together as a team under Coach Henderson now. And, what was our team vision? Our team vision was, November, going to Eureka, California, at the Humboldt State University, and racing against the best athletes in the country to try and win this national title. And look, I'd heard a little bit about the past of SDSU. We had quite a successful past in cross country and distance running within the state and the conference and the country. And so it was really good to hear about that, and walking through the hyper and seeing those pictures of some of the ex-athletes and what have you that have come through the program, and start to set a bit of a tone for what we're going to do here. But we had a good team, so we met all of those. So we had myself on the team. We had Jason Massman, who was the captain. At that time, we had Mark McEwen, my New Zealand mate. There we had a guy called Alan Gross, who was from Arizona. He was on the team. We had James DeMarco from Alaska, was on the team. We had Brian Liebfried from Ivanhoe, Minnesota, on the team as well as a freshman, along with myself as the two freshmen on that team. So that was the team. And from then, I suppose, I remember thinking, how are we going to train together as a unit so we can train as a team, work out each other's strengths and weaknesses, improve each other as we go forward. What are we going to have to do that? And the way it sort of worked out was a couple of the guys on the team actually had classes in the afternoon, and it couldn't actually make our training session at sort of 3:15. So we actually made the decision as a team to train in the morning. So we were sort of meeting at 6 a.m. Before uni started, and getting out there as a squad and doing all of our workouts at that time to keep us all together and train as a team throughout the fall. And again, from a guy from New Zealand, where it doesn't get colder than sort of 40 degrees Fahrenheit, to get up at 6 a.m. in the morning in the fall and winter of South Dakota was pretty tough. It was cold. I remember having the full face balaclava on and the full jacket and, and all this type of stuff, which was just not easy to run in all that gear. So it took a little bit of getting used to and doing all that stuff. The other thing that Tom Henderson did quite well at that point was we actually had, before uni actually started, we had a camp out in Wisconsin. We all went out there for I can't remember how long it was a few days. This little cabin in the middle of nowhere out in Wisconsin. And we're out there just working out as a team, just bringing it together and getting to know each other and all that sort of stuff going forward. Jason Massman was a great captain of the team that year. So a guy that, knew what he was doing, had lots of experience in the NCAA and was a solid runner himself. And I remember his first leadership coming out, where we actually had a tempo session that we were doing there. And for some reason, Mark McEwen was getting on Alan Gross's, getting on his nerves a little bit during the tempo. I think he was sort of smacking off a little bit. And so Alan just pushed Mark and literally pushed him off the road into a ditch as we were doing this tempo, because he was just fired up. And so I remember Jason just stepping in there and just totally dealing with the situation and getting everyone back in line. And so sometimes it's those little things. You're a team. You got one vision, you got one goal, you want to all be friends, but sometimes there are these things that crop up that everyone doesn't always get along. And so the captain, the leadership of the team needs to sort of put everyone back in and refocus on what our mission is going forward. So that was kind of the start, and then really from then on it was just training. It was meets and competitions. Going out to the Roy Griak meet at the University of Minnesota was a great meet. It was one of the first for me. We won most of the events that we competed in that year, including our conference and the regional races. And we were getting reasonably confident by the time we got to California that we had a good shot at the title at that point. But that said, you had some great teams back then. You had your Western State from Colorado, who were just winning basically every year. You had Adams State from Colorado as well. So two schools training at high altitude. They were always so strong. And those are the teams that I was always warned about. These are the teams that are going to be the ones that are going to beat us on the day if we don't put it all together going forward. But
it's one thing to have the talent, right? And you talked a little bit about, if you got all these, talented horses running together, there's going to be some rough going a bit. And you talked about Jason Mossman getting in there, right? Being at the point of friction to kind of, make sure that everybody's focused on that same goal, getting to nationals and winning there, right? And then can you talk about, you got to go to California from probably 30-degree temperature, and California is still going to be probably 70 degrees. Yeah, just take us through the national meet and sort of the preparation. You probably, even environment's totally different. So how do you prepare for something that's going to, you're going to race in 70-degree temperature, and then, oh, by the way, it's like, Gunnison and Alamosa, those guys, when they come down from, altitude, they have an advantage.
Yeah, it's I think it's we had a bunch of hard workers on the team that year, and a guy like myself, I'll be honest and say, look, I think that first year I I think I was lacking some training direction. I think the coach that we had at the point, Tom Henderson, he was a good guy. He was a great pole vault coach. But I started to lose a little bit of faith that we had the right programs in place necessarily, because we had a pole vault coach as our head coach and we had another pole vaulter as our assistant coach on the team. So that worried me a little bit, that were we doing all the right stuff? Did we have enough collective knowledge as a group to work with each other? For me personally, I don't think I was a particularly hard trainer then. I think I'd come over with this mindset that I was probably better than I was. And I had this vision that I was an 800-meter runner. This cross-country thing is sort of, I'll just do it because it's good training. And I wanted to always do short, fast training sessions rather than, the long grinding stuff, which is so important. And I think the other guys on the team were doing that type of stuff. I wasn't. And I didn't have someone to pull me back into line and said, hey, man, this is not the way you train for a cross-country race. We need to do much more. And so I regret that I wasn't able to get into that style of training a little bit more myself personally. But for the other guys, they were hard workers. They were twice a day out doing their long runs, all the intervals. And so they were ready to go. So when we got to nationals, look, I think it was just, we were excited. I think a lot of the guys on the team that year had not even seen the ocean before. So it was really good. So ticky-toeing around California, that part that we're at. It's very green. It's a beautiful part of the world, Northern California up there. And, look over the course. The course was a tough one. I remember the course had a really big hill that I think we had to go up a couple of times during the race. So it was unlike a lot of the other courses that we had run up to that point. And if you come from New Zealand, you know that cross-country is cross-country here. It's like old English style cross-country where you're jumping fences and you're jumping, potholes and small rivers and all this type of stuff, and it's muddy. And when I got to the US, we were basically running on golf courses, which were almost like tracks at that point. So this course in California was very much more probably like a real cross-country course where it was a bit rougher. Had some big hills in it. So we had to sort of get our heads around this new course and how tough it was to get around. So we did the little run around the course like all teams do. We had the NCAA dinner, the night, or whatever it is you do before the NCAA meet. Get to meet some of the other athletes. There were a few other New Zealand athletes around the country at different universities as well. So it was good to catch up with them. And then, the race day came. And look, I'll be honest, Marty, I can't sort of, my memory is getting a little bit fuzzy back to that day. But I remember we had all the heavy hitters come out. So I know, Scott Underwood came out. He had built this team. I think this cross-country victory was essentially his. He's the guy that had the vision to put a team together that could compete for this title. I know he came to most of our meets throughout the season and gave us encouragement and helped us out if we need to. And so he was out there, and there were a lot of alumni who came out to watch. And you could really tell the excitement levels were starting to creep up. And this was my first NCAA meet of my time in the US at this point. So we were all excited for it. And the gun goes, and off we go essentially. And I think I'm just trying to think back to the places. It was the highest scoring total in NCAA history at that time. So I think our winning score was like 123 or something like that, which is quite high. And we had a couple of Mark ran really well. So Mark was in terrible shape at the start of the season, but throughout the year he really started to build his fitness quite quickly. And by the time nationals came around, he was hitting his strides, and he ended up getting fifth, I think, at that race. And then we had Alan Gross came in. I think Alan ran really well as well, and was our second guy home, in about 15th place, somewhere around there. And then we had Jason Massman, probably in the early 20s. We had James DeMarco just squeaked in with I think he was the last All-American place, somewhere in the 30s, I believe. And then I was in the 40s in terms of my place as the fifth runner. So for me, it was a mixed emotions in that, yep, we had just won this national title, but I hadn't performed particularly well. That placing was not what I was probably hoping for. But in reflection, it's what I probably deserved due to the amount of training that I was doing leading up to that. But look, it was exciting times. Brian Liebfried was in there. We only took six athletes, and we didn't take a seventh. We didn't take a seventh runner on this tour. Not sure exactly why, but Pete Gilman was the unlucky guy who didn't make the team to travel to California that year. He was our seventh runner. And, I think Pete a few years later did a lot more training and ended up running, I think, a 2:20 marathon or something like that, and qualified for the US Marathon Olympic Trials. So, he sort of came back from a walk-on the team that year and did really well. And, so we won. We did what we wanted to do. We're all pretty excited about it, and, set our sort of, got our goals for that year.
Yeah, thanks for taking us through that, Nick. I really appreciate that. I was a freshman the very next year in 1997. And actually for you, 1997 was a really difficult year. And I got to see kind of you struggle through, being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Can you talk about some of that struggle from that cross-country season, and then not being, early diagnosed, and then running almost halfway through the season, and then later to be discovered that you actually had type 1 diabetes? Yeah.
So look, I was probably in the country for about 6 months. We got through that NCAA cross country victory, and then coming into the other side, the start of 1997. Started having some signs and symptoms, I suppose, that probably not everything was okay. Being a typical guy, I ignored most of those symptoms at the time, and I was constantly thirsty. I was always hungry. Poor Larson Commons, I don't think could make enough food for me because I was eating so much food. And going to the bathroom all the time, and then basically essentially losing a lot of weight. And so what was actually happening was a lot of people were thinking that I was getting into amazing shape because I was just getting so lean. Like I had literally 0% body fat on me by the time I sort of thought a bit more of it. And I went from about 175 pounds down to about 150 pounds.
Wow.
Over that time period. So I was actually looking quite anorexic. And at some point, some people started sort of saying, "Hey, are you okay?" Because it just wasn't probably looking normal. But originally, a lot of people were just thinking I was getting in great shape. But my training, the racing, just wasn't matching up with that. I was feeling really fatigued. Couldn't train particularly well. Was racing horribly. And so what I decided to do was, well, I'll go to the doctor, but more just to get my blood checked for iron. I thought, maybe I'm iron deficient or something like that. So I went in to get an iron check done, and then after they checked the blood, they sort of came back and said, "Oh no, man, you've got type 1 diabetes. Your blood sugar's sky high." And so at that point, I had to, and this is where Scott Underwood was actually really good at that point. He really stepped in and helped me out because I'm a long way from home. Don't have a lot of support around things like that. So he took me down to Sioux Falls to see the endocrinologist down there and get all that side of things all sorted out. Got put on to insulin and how to use it and how to test your blood and all those sorts of things that you need to be able to monitor closely. So then once that was sort of over, it was come back to Brookings and kind of start again really and just sort of work out, okay, cool, this is the new stuff that's going on in my life but I still want to run. And I was a little bit worried that maybe, I wouldn't have a scholarship on the team anymore. I might get sort of sent home or something like that due to this diagnosis. But there was never any discussion about that. And so it was just time to put the head down. And I remember Coach Underwood Coach Henderson actually saying, look, this is a good opportunity to use yourself as a bit of a guinea pig, and try some different things and see how it affects you, see how it affects your blood sugar levels, see how it affects your performance, try things, tweak, titrate, until you get it right. And so that gave me some good confidence. I'm a bit of a science nerd at heart, so it was a bit of an opportunity to experiment on myself a little bit to see what worked. But the main issues is probably most people know with diabetes is you're either in the risk of going too high or going too low with your blood sugars, and either of those can be very dangerous, as well as obviously not great for performance. So you're always fighting eating enough food to have enough fuel for training and all those things that you do. Making sure you've got the right amount of medication to control those blood sugars, but at the same time making sure that you don't take too much medicine and then you drop and go low, which can be even more dangerous acutely. So it was just really a real balancing act, between going too high and too low and trying to stay on. So in my running originally, the main thing you're worried about is hypoglycemia or low blood sugar because you've taken a bit too much medicine or you've taken it at the wrong time. Timing is everything. And so for me, it was a bit of a risk because as a diabetic, the last thing you want to be is out on a run somewhere by yourself and then suddenly your blood sugar drops and you can pass out and go unconscious and all those types of things and really there's not much you can do about it. So I was prepared and I had a belt bag and I used to load that belt bag up with food and gels and stuff that I'd carry around with me on my runs just in case that happened. But look, in all honesty, I sort of moved it on pretty quick. I got hang of the routine pretty fast. I think being a diabetic, the one thing that it really affected me, and it probably to this day, it still has this effect, and that it made me put on more weight than probably what I would naturally have been. Just sorts of be a bit of a side effect of taking insulin in higher doses. It tends to put on potentially a bit more muscle mass, but also body fat as well. So I always think from that day on, I was a bit heavy to be a runner, in all honesty. So even in my best years there, I was probably about 175 175 pounds, which it's just too heavy to be a competitive distance runner, really. You're too heavy. And today I'm about about 185 pounds to this day. So that makes it quite difficult as a distance runner. So that's probably the thing that had long-lasting, detrimental effects on me. Not so much the management of blood sugars. The one thing that does come in is races, though. So let's say recently I did a half marathon. It starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. You're in this position where do you take your insulin in the morning prior to the event? You don't really want to do that because then your blood sugars can dip during the race. And how much do you eat? You don't know. You can't test your blood sugar during the race. So often you don't take anything. But then if you don't take anything, your blood sugars will go high and that will make you feel a bit crappy as well. So you're kind of in this no man's land of what do I do from a nutritional standpoint to compete for these events. And for the shorter races, like an 800, it's not such a big deal. But for longer races, half marathons or anything like that, it can be a bit more of a juggling act about how to go about that. But Marty, I just pushed on and came to terms with it and just needed to be monitored. I had good support from coaches and stuff at that point that knew about that. But I was a guy that never wanted to talk about these things. So I just wanted to put my head down and just basically get on with it and try and do my best.
Yeah, Nick, this is the most I've ever heard you, kind of really describe to me, what you went through. And I appreciate it. It's very insightful. I can't imagine, what it was like, but you actually, led the team to the NCAA championships that same year. You managed to get things in a good enough level to be at the national championships. And we had to qualify to get there in that rough, my rough freshman year. I think it came 134th overall. I think it was almost last, Nick, but I certainly remember, once again, after my freshman year, you kind of helped me pick up the pieces in my own running. And you were going through something completely different on another level. So I remember that summer you came out to see Bellevue, Washington, right? Seattle. We got to run in the summer, and I think there is you really helped me get confident, some level of confidence back in my running. And it was just about doing the work and being consistent and staying disciplined. Certainly I got to show you some of the trails that I grew up on in Bellevue and in Issaquah and sort of that Western Washington, Seattle area. But that next year in 1998 was it really did transform my running, and I was able to actually put 2 5Ks together and run in the 32 minutes for 10K. I know you and Mark qualified for nationals that year. Unfortunately, the team didn't have the depth that first year of Paul Danger's team. Do you want to kind of share your insights to that 1998 team where we didn't make it to nationals as a team, but you guys went to Kansas and represented us very well there?
Yeah, it was, I think after the 1996 victory, we're mostly a lot of seniors on the team that year. And so the next couple of years were a real rebuilding phase for SDSU at that point. And as you said, Kenosha was, I think we were one of the last teams that year. I think we got 15th in that year out of all teams. And then the next year was 1998 at the University of Kansas with a combined D1 and D2 race. That was there. We didn't qualify the team that year. Me and Mark both got to go. Mark ran quite well again at that meet. I didn't run probably that well. Can't remember where I got, but it was back there somewhere. But hey, that was a good opportunity to get to the big league essentially and watch those D1 runners competing and see that on the same course and just be part of that bigger picture going forward. You mentioned Paul Danger coming on sort of in that 1997 year, really moving in 1998, coming on board too. So I think it was a rebuilding year for him. And I think, we both know Paul really well, and I think we know his strengths, that he's a connector of people. And I think he did a really good job of trying to bring a team together and rebuild from very little and get a team back competitive again within the next sort of 5 years or so that it often takes to build a team from scratch. And I think he did a fantastic job of bringing everybody together and a good team culture around him. Gets involved in all training himself, and I sort of really once Tom Henderson left, and Paul came on board. I think there's a real shift in the fun aspect of being a runner, and him coming along and getting involved, and also just the amount of support that he gave all of his athletes was off the charts, really. And I do need to sort of put the thanks obviously out to Paul, because he supported me a lot through that sort of 97, 98 until the end of my time basically at SDSU. Really helped me, assisted me financially as well as just through passion and enthusiasm. And so he was a strong coach that was, doing his best to build a team again. And I think that 1998 was basically our low point for a team, just because we only qualified 2 individuals that year. And for SDSU, that just wasn't good enough for us, because we know the history of SDSU and we know how strong we are. And also probably at that time, we had the rise of USD as well coming through it at that point. In 1997, they did really, really well. And we didn't. In 98, they did really well, and we didn't do quite so well. And I think that in the interstate rivalry is so strong between those 2 universities that if one's up and the other's down, it kind of sucks to be the one that's down there. So we always had those guys in our minds to try and develop and be there. But I can't remember a lot about the racing those years, to be honest. Now it's all sort of gone back into the archives of the brain a little bit, what races we went to and all the rest of it. But I do remember just us building that team again and all that goes into doing that.
Yeah, I thought when Danger showed up, certainly, he put himself right in the center, and then he gave us a ton of empowerment too, not only just 98, but also 99. And then certainly my senior year, we got a chance to put a solid team to go to nationals and was top 10. We got 9th, but it was really cool to kind of see the transformation over those cross country years. Let me talk to you about your 1999 indoor national championship, the build up of that season, coming out of the 98 cross country season, but now you're in indoor and in 1999 and everybody's coming off a pretty good, fitness level coming out of cross country. But that 1999 NCAA championship mile, would you be able to talk us through sort of that race? Okay, so here we are, RCA Dome, 1999.
So the interesting thing about this race is I'd actually been really sick the week before this race. So about a week prior to going, I came down with quite a bad cold and was really unsure about my ability to actually run at that meet. Had a really high temperature the Monday before. Then we went out to Indianapolis and I just rested the whole week. I just did nothing. Took my zinc tablets and all the rest of it. And, really wasn't sure. And I did the prelim the day before this race and I felt terrible in the prelim. And I think, I made it through, got into the final, but it wasn't easy. That's for sure. And and you can see in the race here, you can see the Adams State guy got out really quick, took it through in a really quick speed. I think he's trying to use his altitude to drop the other team early. He had a couple of Africans there from Abilene Christian who were very solid runners. Carl Jackson there right behind me. He's another New Zealand guy that ran for Western State. And then Mark McEwen behind him, our other SDSU candidate. So, look, it was good to have 2 SDSU guys in the same race. That always makes it a little bit easier when you're warming up and getting prepared to have a familiar face there with you. And Mark was a solid runner over the mile as well as the 5K when he wanted to be. It was good to be in the RCA Dome, probably a very large stadium and quite different from what I'd raced in up to this point. But it was you get to the final and again, can't remember huge amounts about the build up for the race or or anything like that. But just knew I was going to have to run quick. But again, because of being a bit sick that week, I took it quite easy in the race. So I actually sat back in the field. I didn't try and go out with the leaders. I just sort of tucked in behind Chad Feldy. He was a guy from USD, and I knew Chad pretty well. We'd raced a lot, and just thought I'll sit behind him. He'd be a comfortable person just to sort of tag off for the first few laps and see how it goes. And
yeah, you're sixth right now, and Chad Feldy kind of looks back, trying to figure out where you are, and you're right there on his tail, and then you choose to go, right? And it's like you make a decision. What were you thinking when you now in fourth place, and Carl was Jackson's coming back?
I think we had about I think I took off at about 300 meters to go. And look, I was just feeling quite good at that point. I really came alive in the final and just felt so much better, and actually surprised myself because I wasn't expecting to feel good. But with 300 meters to go, I just felt good. I felt strong. So I just let it go. Passed everybody relatively easy. Was surprised when I passed everyone. And then basically that was it. National title. Wasn't expecting it at that time. To be perfectly blunt, there were some tough guys in that race that had run some quick times leading up to that. And for us at SDSU, it was quite tough training in the facilities that we had. As you'll remember, we had the D-shaped indoor track. And so whether it did make a difference or not, who knows? But you always felt that when you have to slow down for two of the corners to get around that track, you're always wondering, am I doing the work that I need to do? Am I doing the speed work that I need to do to win a meet like this? And you always doubted yourself because you weren't sure. So, but yeah, it was just one of those races where things just came together. There was a little bit of adversity, a little bit leading up to that event, which I overcame and felt good on the day. And and it was a great race from Chad Feldy as well, the USD guy, to get third in that meet. I think he was really surprised at that, and he ran a blinder as well. So it was good to have another conference guy right there as well, leading up to it. But well, I'm proud of that race. I think it's one of the to get the NCAA title as well as the championship record in that meet was something I was definitely very excited about and proud of for many years to come with that. And yeah,
Nick, that's pretty cool, man. Yeah, you set the D2 record at 4:03. Pretty impressive. Right, the cameraman drops the camera. It's kind of funny when you.
The cameraman, we've got to give him kudos. The cameraman's Jason Church.
Yes,
who was our pole vault coach at the time there. So yeah, Jason was on camera duties, and dropped the camera at the end. So yeah, no, it was a great event and a great meet, and still sort of very fondly look back on that time.
Yeah, no, it was pretty exciting, certainly to hear that you had won, and then you came back, and everybody's pretty fired up about, well, gosh, we're training with, Nick, right? And if we can hang on or at least stay near Nick, right, we have a really good chance of doing something special ourselves, right? So, we put some things together there, and those last 2 years together is pretty fun. Let's talk a little bit more about, now 1999, 1998, 1997, 1996. You've you've had some time now living in the States, studying and then training and then racing during the, what perspective would you like share with anybody who's even considering about, coming to the United States, experiencing, the university setting, and then also, right, chasing dreams of pursuing athletics?
Yeah, look, a bit different from my time back in the mid 90s. I mean, today, most of New Zealand's top talent actually heads over to the US quite early. We've got the young Samuel Tanner, who races for the University of Washington right now, who just set the NCAA Division I record and qualified for the Olympics indoors, in the indoor 1500. So he's based over there, and look, pretty much all of our top guys from New Zealand all go to the States now and compete. So it is seen as the best option for most young guys coming through now, which certainly wasn't what was happening when I was that age going forward. But I think there's a good reason for that. I think first of all, the NCAA system it's one of its own. It's probably the best sporting competition in the world, probably hands down, in terms of bringing universities together, bringing communities together, having your conferences, having your regions, having the national championships. You think about basketball and the football and those revenue generating sports and the crowds that those bring, and all the community spirit that goes along with those types of events. It really is just unbeatable as an experience and as an educational and a sporting opportunity combined. So I think it's a bit of a no-brainer, I think, nowadays to head over there. You get your support with your education, you get your support with your food and accommodation and healthcare and physiotherapy and all those things that come. But the opportunity to race top athletes week in and week out in different parts of the country is, again, just such a great opportunity. And I look favorably back on my days there, and it's really just the traveling with your teammates that are the things that you remember. So just getting in that bus. The bus was parked outside the Hyper building, 9 o'clock on a Friday morning, and off we go for our Saturday meet, and we all jump in and head off to the competition as a whole busload of athletes, and then staying in the hotels and competing together, and then coming home. Just such a great opportunity, and those are the things that I really, really miss from my time there. The people that you get to meet, not just from your university, but from all the other universities that you rub shoulders with. So those are the things I think. SDSU especially had some really nice people that would just go out of their way to help you, offer a place to stay during the holidays. I had a guy that was, who used to live next to Wendell, who used to live next to Coach Danger, who used to give me work and give me jobs and help me out with various things. And there was no shortage of that in my whole time there. So, that Brookings community was just so friendly and accommodating to someone like myself coming into town. For me, it's when I reflect back on those days as a coach now as well, I just didn't, as I mentioned before, I just didn't train hard enough. And now that's really obvious that I just didn't do the training that was required. And you look at all the talents and all the times that young people are running now, they're just training hard. And that's the one thing looking back on now is I just wish I had just done a bit more work, run more miles, not thought that I knew it all at that age. And because I didn't, I just did, too much anaerobic work. Now I know that too much anaerobic work just destroys your aerobic development. And then as a middle distance runner, that's everything. All those types of simple mistakes that actually really affected probably my development at that point. So those are my regrets looking back during that time. But that said, what a system, what an opportunity I had to go over there. And up to 1999, there were some really good experiences that I was lucky enough to be part of.
That's great, Nick. Thank you. So as a coach, certainly you will share the great things that South Dakota has to offer, right? Any athletes on the horizon looking at coming to the Midwest, maybe, or maybe even just on the States in the next year?
Oh, like I said, Marty, it's pretty much all of our top guys are all making that transition over there, both males and females. So that's great for the NCAA system. It's probably not quite so good for, say, the New Zealand domestic system. We lose a lot of our talent. You think of a guy like even Nick Willis, who essentially hasn't been based in New Zealand since the early 2000s. So most New Zealanders don't know much about him. What he's accomplished. He gives a lot back to the sport. So when he comes back to New Zealand, he does run clinics and he does, meet the kids and all those types of things. But, when you take the cream of your crop and take them to another country, they get lost and they're not building the sport in your country. And they're not inspiring the next generation of young people coming through. I want to be like that. So that's probably the only sort of issue from domestically from New Zealand, for example. But most of our guys do go overseas, and they go to a range of universities, and I'm sure ones in the Midwest or wherever it might be. Tends to be the ones on the West Coast are a little bit more favourable, just simply because it's a bit closer to home. It's a direct flight essentially from New Zealand to Los Angeles, so it's quite nice to have that ability to get home a bit easier. But we have quite a few over in the East Coast schools, and you think of all our best runners in the last 20 years, they've all come through the US system and been developed there, and gone on to do great things.
No, that's cool. So what are your thoughts on the running world in 2021 with the post-collegiate club systems and the opportunities that certainly are not only here in the States but also around the world? It just seems like there's a lot more opportunities for people to have a couple more years to extend maybe their athletic potential, to see how far they could actually go. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the quality of running is so high now across the world. The times that you're seeing now, both through developing levels as well as the elite levels, are just going up really, really rapidly. So I think that's great to watch. There's a real running revolution where running is becoming kind of popular again. I think last year or the year before in the US, there's something like over 1 million people did a marathon. So there's some real popularity there, and it's that grassroots stuff which helps make running popular again. And then when a sport becomes popular, then more people want to do it. And then you've got the ability to build up the cream of the crop as well as just as an event, which is always good to see. The running times are ridiculous when you look at the elites. There are just some times that are just blowing us out of the water in terms of what's going on there. Young Jacob Ingebrigtsen, and what sort of times he's been running from a very young age are quite incredible. You've obviously got Cheptegei doing his thing in the 5 and the 10K. These times are just out of the park. You've got your marathon times that are coming through, both from males and females. They're just crazy what they're doing. So that's all positive for the sport. The sport does have a lot of competition as well at this point. I mean, there are a lot of other things that people can do. And endurance sports in general seem to be something that people migrate to when they get a little bit older. So they get through their 20s and then they're starting to look for an outlet. And often that outlet is endurance type sports. And in New Zealand especially, running is competing directly with sports like triathlon. Ironman type of events are very popular over here. You've got bike races, and cycling is very popular over here. You've got adventure racing, which with the New Zealand outdoor environment that we have, adventure racing tends to be very popular. So worldwide, I think we're seeing a lot of different activities, a lot of different events and sports that people can buy into. And so that means that as a runner or as a running event, you have to do things so much better in order to capture more of that market that's going forward. So, looking forward to seeing hopefully some good new initiatives to draw people to running as an opportunity going forward. I think the New Zealand system is quite different than the US in that we have a club system. So anyone that runs competitively in New Zealand runs for a club. But there's even a bit of a shift away from that now, where there's not so much of a need to be a member of a club. You can, most of these big events, you can enter and just run without needing to be a member of a club. So clubs are really struggling here in New Zealand to get enough membership to pay dues, and many are actually going out of business and going under, which is sad to see. But that's just where our sport is right now, and the way people choose to spend their money, and whether they want to be part of a club or whether they just want to do a sport, compete at the odd event, and go from there. The US obviously has some really good, I suppose, clubs, you could call them, professional training groups, which I think do an incredible job with post-collegiate runners. It's not something I had a lot to do with myself. Post-collegiately, I didn't run for too long competitively after I left college. But I really would have liked to. I would have liked to have that outlet and some way to focus my attention, focus my passion on the sport, and keep developing my skill set at that time. And so, look, it's a big sport. There's a lot going on. And as a coach, I just see, I see how it affects young people coming through the sport and where it can potentially, send them.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nick. This is a very, great insight. Can you talk a little bit about your role in the New Zealand Institute of Sport and sort of, for anybody who's in America, right? What it is that, that you all do there, and then what's, what do you see on the horizon for that role as well?
Oh yeah, so I work at the New Zealand Institute of Sport, and look, I'm an exercise physiologist by trade. That's what I have my master's degree in. So I've worked in a range of fields around the sort of science of sport and conditioning and getting fitter and all that side of stuff. So when I came back to New Zealand after my time in the States, I actually started working for the Institute of Sport way back then. And I now manage the Institute of Sport here in New Zealand. And, we're actually a tertiary education provider, first and foremost. So we give degrees and diplomas and things like that out to students. Most of our students, though, tend to be higher performing athletes in a range of sports. So everything from rugby to soccer to cricket to running, whatever it might be. They can all come and we can give them the education basically in the sport sciences and sport management fields. And at the same time, we can also help develop them as athletes. So we have training facilities, gyms, labs, facilities that we can work with young athletes to help develop them. So you could almost say it's a little bit like the US system, where you go to a university, you compete, they're kind of your club. You compete for the university looks after you, they give you some physio, they give you some gym to work out in, They can give you some testing. So we've kind of mimicked that a little bit here in New Zealand on a much smaller scale. The ability to give an athlete an education, but also help foster their sport and keep them passionate and interested in it, and try and give them that all-round support, everything from nutrition to sports science to medical to psychology, all those different areas that any athlete needs to get better at what they do. So that's kind of the space that I'm in now, and I manage a lot of that and the people that come through and our academic programs, as well as athlete development side of things.
That's really cool, Nick. Any international students that come, any Americans even that have come over?
Yeah, look, we had an American university come through probably a couple of years ago now. I'm forgetting which one it was. They were from Georgia somewhere, but they had a tour that they came to New Zealand for, and they came through our facility and wanted to know a little bit about what we did and how we worked and all the rest of it. So I think they're on a bit of an educational tour to find out how education works in other countries. And we're a private provider, so we're kind of like a private education as opposed to public education. So we work a little bit differently from that standpoint. But no, not a lot from the US, because the costs to come down to New Zealand and get an education are very expensive. So, again, you're probably looking at $20,000 a year to come down here to study, as well as all the other costs that would be associated with studying here. So the US has got so many universities itself, there's probably not a lot of point coming down to New Zealand to necessarily do that. But we do get a lot of people from India, for example, Sri Lanka, Japan, a lot of around Asia, especially. We have quite a big portal of international students coming through from that part of the world. We would like to also expand into Europe a little bit, because part of what we do is we've got a bit of expertise around sports like rugby. New Zealand were the world champions in rugby, so we had a bit of kudos in that space. So trying to recruit people from Europe and England and stuff to maybe come down and get an education, a bit of an OE, bit of an overseas experience, as well as get some of the rugby support through the club system that we have here as well. So, but no Americans. We've just hired an American at one of our campuses up in Auckland. So okay. There's an American guy that's just started up there as he's running the campus up there. So he's just started his job. So he's married to a New Zealander, so he decided to come back to New Zealand and do his thing. But yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. No, Nick, that doesn't exist yet for a lot of Americans to come over as international students. But, if a bunch of South Dakotans start showing up, you'll know what generated that interest then. Maybe this podcast then. No, that's cool. I definitely got to make it to the South Island and certainly, obviously, your hometown of Auckland as well in the North Island. And you obviously go up to the coast to see Mark. I think we're trying to figure out the timeline for that, but man, this is so cool. Like, just to be able to sit down and like talk to you again, see you, and thank you so much for just sharing like the true insight. Because as a teammate, you really helped me a lot, during those developmental years in college, man. And right, your year of running 403, I ran 417. So I got to figure, being, trying to hang on to in some of those repeats in the D and the hyper, man, it certainly helped me. So it was a lot of fun just to see, how fast or how good you could really be.
Oh, it's good, Marty. No, I've got a lot of people to thank from my time back there. That's for sure. And I'll never forget those people, and and your sort of hospitality and bringing me out to Seattle that year, and my summer up with James DeMarco up in Alaska and in various other places across my time are things I still fondly remember. I certainly wouldn't turn away or change my time in the US at all. I really still look back on that time with a lot of fond memories. And, and people like yourself, I'm looking forward to catching up again. I have been thinking about coming out to the Jackrabbit invite.
Oh, yeah.
And
Let's
try and
go.
fly. I come to the US on holiday pretty much every year. So I'm there pretty much every year. So at some point, I'll be looking to try and make my way over in that direction in October, and try and jump in that race and see how I do.
Yeah, we'll go together. That'll be awesome, man. Yeah, that's great. Well, it's great to catch up with you, Nick. Thank you.
No problems, Marty. All the best to you, mate, and pass on
Yeah.
the best wishes to anyone else that you run into.
Appreciate it, bro. Thanks. Take care.
Awesome. See you, buddy.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Pivotal Running Podcast. Make sure to visit our website, pivotalrunning.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you simply would tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. Thanks.